Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're really diving into something special, a wonderfully vivid personal account. We're looking at Eating Black Beans in the early 60s by Eugenia Gallardo, and our mission really is to explore this fascinating glimpse into daily life, the meticulous food prep, the sheer resourcefulness needed back then. We're talking Guatemala, early 1960s, all seen through the lens of, well, black beans. It's this amazing mix of nostalgia, some genuinely surprising challenges, and deep cultural insights. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, what's so fascinating here is how something that seems so simple, so everyday, like cooking beans, can actually reveal so much about a society. It's like a window, isn't it?
Ow.
Into their technology, their values, even the daily struggles and wins of the people.
Absolutely. So the story kicks off where a lot of good food stories do at the market. Picture this.
Yeah.
You're going to buy beans, but forget prepackaged bags. No, they're weighed out for you in this really old school way. Eugenia describes the vendor putting the beans in a little tin bowl, tied with a cord to another bowl, hanging from a wooden stick. Then an iron weight just marked 1 pound goes in the other bowl, and the vendor balances the whole thing by hand.
Wow, that kind of direct, person-to-person commerce is such a contrast to how we shop now. And it really speaks to a time before all the standard packaging where every single transaction was almost like a little negotiation, and your own watchfulness was basically your best protection as a consumer.
And you definitely needed that watchfulness. Turns out the elders knew a thing or two. They'd warn you to watch the vendor's little finger. Apparently, he'd subtly press down on the bean bowl.
Oh, really?
Yeah, adding a bit of fake weight, shortchanging you maybe a few ounces. Eugenia remembers he might lift the finger, to show he's playing fair, but she says, if you blinked, he made his move. Huh.
That's incredible. That tiny detail, that interaction, it just shows how even the most basic exchange was this delicate balance of, well, trust and suspicion.
Yeah.
And that practical wisdom, the kind passed down generation to generation, it wasn't just about saving a few pennies. It was absolutely essential for navigating life and, protecting your family's food.
So true. Okay, so you've navigated the market, hopefully successfully. Now comes the next big step. The cleaning ritual back home. You'd spread the beans out on the table, and the real work began. This meant carefully picking out the bad ones, any beans with little holes from insects, which Eugenia calls ugly gray ladybirds.
Ladybirds. Interesting name for that.
Right, and then you also had to find these brownish gray pebbles, little bits of stone harvested right along with the beans. She calls it the result of those extremely organic bygone years.
That really underlines a completely different era of food production. It's just worlds away from today's super processed, pre-cleaned stuff. It highlights the enormous amount of manual labor that went into food before you even thought about cooking. Really makes you think.
And about those insects, the ugly, multi-legged bean eaters, she calls them, the live ones crawling on the table. Well, Eugenia, as an 8-year-old, she had this whole moral dilemma about how to get rid of them.
Oh.
Yeah, killing them was disgusting. Apparently their insides were far too watery.
Drowning didn't always work. Some could swim. And boiling them. To her candid soul, that just felt like cruelty.
So what did she do?
Her solution was pretty pragmatic. Just toss them in the trash and, quote, hope for the best.
Huh. That's such a relatable childhood memory, isn't it? It shows the sensory side, even the ethical side of preparing food from a kid's view. It really grounds the whole thing in a very real, very human experience. Those little things stick with you.
Exactly. So after all that painstaking cleaning, you'd end up with maybe 2/3 of a pound of clean black beans. Then came the soaking crucial step, a half day in cold tap water. This softened them up, but just as importantly, it saved on fuel and cooking time later. Only then were they ready for, well, the next, maybe even more intense part.
Right, the cooking itself.
Yeah, so how did they actually cook these things efficiently? This is where we meet what Eugenia calls the greatest cooking invention ever in Guatemala at that time. We're talking about the pressure cooker, the time saver, specifically the Presto brand. They affectionately called it La Olla Presto.
Ah, the Presto pot, yes. She describes it as very heavy, shiny, and sometimes dangerous. You can almost feel the tension there, the convenience versus the risk.
Oh, absolutely. Introducing a device like that into the kitchen, it was genuinely revolutionary. It slashed cooking times for things like beans that usually took hours and hours. That wasn't just about making life easier. It freed up a huge amount of labor, saves fuel. It really changed the rhythm of the household.
But using it wasn't simple. It sounds like quite an operation. You had to know how to fit this rubber ring perfectly between the lid and the pan, and how to close it the right way clockwise and open it counterclockwise. A very lid had this little device for releasing air pressure. And on that, there was a round, very important piece with engraved numbers. That was the valve for controlling the pressure.
It shows how new tech, even home appliances, demanded a completely new set of skills, a different level of understanding. It wasn't just stirring a pot anymore. You were managing a complex, potentially dangerous machine.
Yeah.
A real shift in domestic work.
And dangerous it could be. Sometimes that round, very important piece, the valve, would just shoot into the air for no apparent reason.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, releasing this blast of pressurized steam full of tiny bean particles and boiling black bean water with the consistency of soup. The result, total disaster. Beans splattered over the stove, the countertops, the floor, the ceiling.
Wow.
And probably on your arms and face if you happen to be nearby.
That mental image.
Yeah.
It just drives home the real dangers involved. That heavy pressure wasn't just a turn of phrase. It demanded intense focus, constant caution. Cooking wasn't just a chore. For certain things, it was, well, a high-stakes operation.
But here's the part that really got me, the most astonishing detail. Guess who is usually in charge of this high-stakes, potentially explosive operation?
Let me guess. Not an adult.
Exactly. Eugenia reveals that her 8-year-old self, who wasn't even allowed near a knife because it was considered too dangerous for my age, was in charge of this life-threatening operation.
An 8-year-old. Wow. That really changes how you think about childhood back then, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It highlights how practical needs, economic necessities often push kids into roles with huge responsibility. Childhood wasn't always this protected bubble. Sometimes it was an early, very serious apprenticeship in keeping the household running, especially if the adults weren't around, like her father working, her aunt at church.
Incredible. And the process didn't end there. The instruction manual, the ideal scenario, said to open the cooker by taking it to the sink and running cold water over the lid. But their kitchen wasn't the one in the manual. She says, no sink in the kitchen, no fancy faucet.
So what did they do?
So 8-year-old Eugenia had to carry this heavy, blistering hot pressure cooker all the way from the kitchen to a laundry sink way out in the back of the house. And even there, she couldn't just put the pot under a tap. She had to painstakingly pour water over the lid using a bowl. A process, she says, took an eternity.
Oh, the effort involved.
But she says every single time she managed to get that steam release safely and twist the lid open, she felt like a survivor.
I bet that feeling, that sense of accomplishment, it just perfectly captures the resourcefulness, the resilience needed. Adapting this new technology to their actual environment, which wasn't ideal. It also shows this incredible dedication to a daily task that was absolutely vital for the family's food. Just remarkable ingenuity, really.
It's so true. Okay, so the beans are finally safely cooked. Now they become this absolute fixture of daily life. We're talking breakfast and dinner, 7 days a week, a true staple.
The cornerstone of the diet.
Exactly. Eugenia explains why. It was partly a money-saving tradition, but also their undisputed nutritional value packed with iron. So they'd have them with eggs in the morning, or maybe alongside whatever lunch leftovers they had for dinner.
And that context is key, isn't it? This was central to food security, to nutrition, especially in a time before most people had refrigerators. Efficiency, getting the most nutritional bang for your buck, that was paramount. And a versatile staple like beans was just invaluable.
Right, and the lack of a fridge brings us to the next big challenge. As she says, there was no place for leftovers from one day to the next since we didn't have a refrigerator. But beans were the exception, precisely because cooking them was neither quick nor easy. You couldn't just whip up a fresh batch every day.
So they had to preserve them somehow.
Exactly. And the method was ingenious, though labor-intensive. Constant boiling, at least once a day, and 2 or 3 times on hot days.
Wow, constant boiling. That's a fascinating glimpse into pre-modern food preservation, isn't it? It shows the daily commitment needed just to keep food safe and edible. A continuous effort, totally different from just popping leftovers in the fridge.
And this constant boiling led to this really interesting transformation. The beans went through distinct stages. So on the day they were cooked, they were frijoles parados, standing beans, basically whole beans. They'd remove the garlic used in cooking, supposedly to prevent gas, and add salt.
Okay, stage 1.
Stage 2. The next day, they became parados con cebolla, standing beans with onion. They boiled them again, this time with some fried onions added.
Adding flavor, keeping them going.
Yep. Then, as the days went on, all that boiling made them softer and softer. Eventually, the skins started separating from the insides, which she notes wasn't pleasant on the tongue.
I can imagine.
So at that point, stage 3, They had to be mashed using some kind of special tool and then fried with onions again. Now, they were frijoles colados, strained beans. She describes them as being like very watery mashed potatoes.
Interesting texture change.
And then the final stage, they'd get boiled again and again, losing more liquid, thickening up, until they became this paste fried to the consistency of a pate you could spread on bread.
A bean pate.
Yeah, and get this, she declares this stage the most delicious.
That's amazing. It's just brilliant how one single ingredient gets transformed through all this processing into different textures, different flavors. It's such a clever example of culinary ingenuity, driven by necessity, maximizing the food, minimizing waste. Really smart.
And guess who was often responsible for managing all these stages?
Let me guess. The 8-year-old survivor.
You got it. Since she was almost always home, Eugenia was in charge of the beans' well-being. She had to do the boiling, the mashing, the frying. Quite the responsibility.
Day after day.
Day after day. And this meant she became an expert in spoilage detection. She had to check them constantly. By smell, if something seemed off. By sight, if they developed a milky liquid, a bad sign. And by taste, they should never be sour at any stage.
Wow. That's basically a practical education in food science, isn't it? Using all your senses.
Yeah.
Observation, smell, taste. These were vital skills for keeping the family safe, for preserving this precious food source. She really was the guardian of the beans.
She really was. But sometimes, even with all that care, spoilage was a threat. And for those moments, there was a secret weapon. Eugenia calls it a miracle. Ajinomoto.
MSG.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But here's the interesting part. It wasn't just another ingredient. She says every household had it, but it was used secretly, a kind of culinary sin.
Secretly, a
Yeah.
culinary thing. Now that is intriguing. It makes you wonder about the social dynamics there. Why the secrecy? Why the guilt? Was it seen as like cheating, a shortcut that wasn't proper cooking, or maybe a sign you couldn't afford to let food spoil? That tension between practicality and sort of culinary pride is fascinating.
Absolutely. And the reasons for using it were crystal clear, very practical, as Eugenia puts it. Nobody wanted to waste the cost of beans from the market, and I didn't want to risk my life cooking them only to throw them away.
Makes perfect sense from that perspective.
So when you put it all together, what does this whole story tell us about life back then?
Well, I think it shows that every single part of getting food on the table, from buying it to preparing it, cleaning it, cooking it, preserving it, it was all loaded with meaning, with effort, with risk sometimes. This isn't just a charming story about beans. It's a really vivid snapshot of resilience, of family finances, how domestic work happened, and just the incredibly deep cultural weight that food carries, way beyond just, calories.
What a journey. Eugenia Gallardo really paints such a rich picture in eating black beans in the early 60s. From those market tricks to the terrifying dance with the pressure cooker and that incredible transformation of the beans over days. It's a story of survival, pure ingenuity, and this really deep connection to the food that kept a family going. We really have to appreciate the detail and the personal honesty she shares in this account.
Definitely. And it leaves us with a question, doesn't it, for you listening? How much of that kind of practical, hands-on, almost instinctual knowledge, everything from picking good ingredients without labels to keeping food safe without a fridge, how much of that have we lost? Or maybe just transformed with our super streamlined food systems today? What are the hidden trade-offs, the costs and benefits of relying so much on convenience now compared to that really labor-intensive but maybe deeply connected approach they had back then?
Powerful questions indeed. Something to think about. Thank you for diving deep with us today. Until next time, stay curious.